In the monastery's stone halls, the last notes of vespers had long since faded. The sun, a memory of saffron and rose, had already dipped behind the distant hills, leaving the sky to the gradual sweep of deepening twilight. Slowly, ever so slowly, the world outside fell into a quiet, waiting hush. Within the heavy walls, a similar stillness settled, a hush broken only by the soft, rhythmic toll of the monastic bell, marking the hour of Candlelight. It was at this hour, when the world prepared for rest, that Master William, a man whose hands knew the weight of sacred texts and the delicacy of gold leaf, moved with purpose. His footsteps were a gentle counterpoint to the bell's fading echo, a whisper against the cold, worn flagstones of the cloister. The air carried a cool draught, a scent of damp stone and ancient dust. He passed beneath the arched doorways, his form a shadow against the last lingering gray of the day, until he reached the heavy oak door of his sanctuary, the scriptorium. With a soft, almost soundless effort, he pushed the door inward. A faint, earthy scent of parchment, ink, and beeswax greeted him. It was a smell as familiar and comforting as his own skin, a fragrance of purpose and quiet devotion. He stepped inside, and the door sighed shut behind him, sealing him within a world of his own making. The room was bathed in the waning light, the last vestiges of daylight filtering through the high arched windows. It cast long, ethereal shadows that stretched across the rows of simple wooden desks and reached toward the tall, vaulted ceiling. Dust motes, like tiny stars, danced in these fading beams, visible for a brief, glorious moment before disappearing into the gloom. William stood for a moment in the center of the room, breathing in the silence. It was not an empty silence, but a living one, filled with the presence of countless hours of labor and the whispered prayers of generations of scribes before him. He felt the weight of that history in the cool air. It caressed his cheeks. His first task, a nightly ritual, was to bring light into the deepening darkness. He walked to a small table near the wall, where a single unlit beeswax candle stood sentinel in a heavy pewter holder. With deliberate, unhurried movements, he took up a tinderbox. The metallic clink of flint against steel was sharp and brief, a sudden spark that bloomed into a tiny flame, flickering against the wick. The scent of burnt sulfur was quickly replaced by the warm, sweet perfume of melting beeswax as the flame took hold. He carried the lit candle with a reverence born of long habit. The warm, buttery light danced and swayed, casting his moving shadow in grotesque, shifting shapes upon the wall. One by one, he placed the small, glowing beacons on the desks, each flame a small prayer against the coming night. As the number of candles grew, the room began to take on a soft, golden glow. The stone walls, once cold and gray, seemed to drink in the warmth, their rough surfaces now aglow. He made his way to his own desk, his steps so quiet they seemed to absorb the sounds of the room rather than add to them. His desk was a place of ordered chaos, a testament to his life's work. On its surface lay a beautiful, unfinished sheet of vellum, its surface as smooth and pale as cream. Beside it, his tools waited for his touch, a cluster of quills from goose and swan their ends, meticulously trimmed and sharpened, small clay pots of vermilion ultramarine and malachite green pigments, a small agate burnisher for polishing the gold, and his most cherished tool, a small delicate brush for applying the shimmering precious gold leaf. He sank into his worn wooden chair, the ancient wood groaning a soft protest beneath his weight. It was a familiar sound, a small part of the nightly symphony of the scriptorium. He stretched out his long fingers, their tips stained with a rainbow of pigments and the ghost of soot-black ink, and laid them gently on the vellum. The feel of the prepared calfskin was cool and smooth beneath his fingertips, a perfect canvas. He took a moment, just a moment, to close his eyes and listen. The only sounds now were the gentle, rhythmic flicker of the candles and the soft whisper of his own breathing. He inhaled deeply, the air a mixture of beeswax and dried ink, and felt the quietude of the room seep into his bones, calming the last vestiges of his day. The world outside was gone, and only this room, this desk, and the sacred task before him remained. He was ready. The gentle glow of the beeswax candles now filled the scriptorium, a warm, buttery light that banished the deep shadows. Master William, seated at his desk, felt the quiet warmth of the room settle around him like a soft woolen blanket. The air, once cool and heavy with the day's last chill, was now infused with the subtle, honeyed scent of the burning wax. His hands, so accustomed to the weight of prayer books and the delicate dance of the quill, moved with a patient, unhurried grace. Before him, on a sturdy oaken stand, lay the incomplete manuscript, its pages open to a blank space that awaited his careful work. But first, he needed a fresh page. He rose slowly from his chair, the ancient wood creaking a soft, familiar protest, and walked to a heavy chest against the far wall. The chest, hewn from dark, aged wood, was the repository of a monastery's greatest treasure, its prepared vellum. With a whispered prayer of thanks for the animal whose skin had become this canvas, he lifted the lid. The scent that emerged was a faint, clean smell, like sun-warmed earth and dried grass, a fragrance of the fields and the life that had once walked upon them. From within, he carefully selected a stack of prepared pages. Each sheet had been meticulously stretched, scraped, and polished to a creamy, smooth finish. He returned to his desk, carrying the vellum as if it were spun from glass. The pages were a pale, almost ethereal shade, a soft ivory that seemed to absorb the candlelight rather than reflect it. He placed the stack on his desk, and with a slow, deliberate motion, began to separate them. He worked with his eyes half closed, his fingertips doing most of the work. The sensation of the vellum was a story in itself. He felt the subtle texture of each sheet, the side that had been the hair of the calf, now incredibly smooth, and the side that had been its flesh, even smoother still. He held the first sheet up to the light, turning it this way and that. The candlelight, so gentle and forgiving, illuminated the page, revealing its hidden character. Here, a faint ripple or a vein had once pulsed with life. There, a tiny scar, a memory of a brush with a thorn in the pasture. These were not imperfections to be discarded. They were the very soul of the page, the history of the parchment itself. He traced the lines with a single reverent finger, his touch so light it seemed not to even exist. He ran his fingers over the surface, his touch sensitive to the slightest variation. He could feel the fine nap of the fibers, the direction of the grain. He brought the page close to his face, breathing in the scent of its preparation, a clean, almost leathery smell, a promise of permanence. With his thumb and forefinger, he gently tested the tension, the slight resistance of the skin to his touch. Each page had its own voice, its own subtle song. One was a bit thicker, with a more pronounced grain. Another was as thin and translucent as a whisper, almost transparent in the flickering light. He murmured to himself, a low, tranquil sound in the silent room, a soft commentary on the character of each sheet. After a long while, he selected 3 pages, placing them aside for his evening's work. The others he returned to the stack, their time to be illuminated yet to come. The 3 chosen sheets, placed side by side, seemed to hum with a quiet readiness. They were ready to receive his words, his paints, and his precious gold. He ran his hand over them one last time, a final calming benediction before the evening's work truly began. He was ready to start, to bring light and life to these beautiful waiting pages. The pages lay before him, a trio of creamy waiting canvases, their subtle imperfections and unique textures now a familiar and welcome sight. The candlelight painted the desk in a soft, warm glow, and the air held the stillness of true concentration. Master William felt the quiet urgency of the moment, the sacred prelude to his work. The time for silent reverence was past. Now was the time for the ritual of preparation. His attention turned to the small, leather-bound pouch that lay beside his pigments. It was a simple, worn thing, smelling faintly of age and the oils of his hands. Within its folds, nested like treasures, were his quills. He untied the leather cord and opened the pouch, revealing a small forest of feathers, some from a humble goose, others from a proud swan, each one chosen with care for its strength and flexibility. He reached inside, his long fingers moving with a sculptor's touch, and selected a single beautiful goose quill. It was a fine feather, its shaft a pearlescent white, its veins still intact, but trimmed for his use. This quill, he knew from long experience, had the perfect balance of firmness and give. It was a vessel for his ink, an extension of his own hand, a tool of both precision and grace. He held the quill up to the candlelight, turning it slowly. The light caught the fine filaments of the feather, revealing a delicate structure of intersecting lines. He ran his thumb and forefinger down its length, feeling its cool, smooth surface, the slight curl of its natural shape. Now came the most delicate part of the preparation, the sharpening. From a small carved wooden box, he took a tiny razor-sharp penknife. The steel of the blade was dark and ancient, honed to an impossible keenness over many years. It was a tool he wielded with the utmost respect. He held the quill's shaft firmly in one hand, the knife in the other. He began to trim the end of the feather, a process that was more carving than cutting. The small, thin curls of keratin peeled away under the knife, falling softly onto the desktop. The sound was a gentle, rasping whisper, a quiet shee of steel against the firm, hollow shaft. It was a sound that was at once both soothing and a testament to his focus. He worked slowly, his breath held in the moment. He first cut the quill to a point, then began the careful work of shaping the nib. He had to be precise, creating the perfect slit down the center that would allow the ink to flow just so, neither too much nor too little. The final point had to be just right, a clean, even edge that would produce lines of consistent width and beauty. The process took a long time, each stroke of the knife deliberate and measured. He would stop, hold the newly sharpened nib up to his eye, and inspect his work with a critical but knowing gaze. The candlelight illuminated the fine, newly cut point, making the edges gleam. The scent of the freshly cut feather was a subtle, almost earthy perfume in the air. Finally, he was satisfied. The nib was perfect, a crisp, sharp point with a clean, even slit. He ran a single finger across the tip, testing its texture, feeling the slight give of the newly cut surface. He set the knife down, its work for the evening done. The newly sharpened quill lay on his desk, a beautiful, stark white line against the polished wood. It was no longer just a feather. It was a tool, ready to be dipped in ink, ready to bring words and images to life upon the waiting vellum. The stage was set, the final prop in place. With the newly sharpened quill lying peacefully on the desk, its work poised to begin, Master William's gaze fell to the tools of color that would bring the page to life. The candlelight, unwavering now, cast a soft halo around a small, square box made of dark, fine-grained wood. It was a simple object, yet within it resided the essence of the earth, the sky, and the heavens themselves. He reached out, and with the same unhurried reverence that marked all his actions, he lifted the lid. A sudden, deep breath escaped him, as if he were encountering a beloved scent after a long absence. The air, already rich with beeswax and vellum, now filled with a new, complex perfume. The first scent was a dry, earthy fragrance, the deep, mineral smell of the pigments. He could pick out the faint, coppery scent of vermilion, a hint of the ground-down cinnabar that created its brilliant red. There was the subtle, metallic tang of malachite, a scent of the ancient earth from which the vibrant green was born. The cool, almost stony smell of lapis lazuli, the source of the precious ultramarine, spoke of distant, sacred mountains. It was the smell of the earth, of rocks and minerals crushed and refined to a fine, holy dust. Within the box, the colors were a hushed rainbow. Small, carefully labeled jars held the powdered pigments, each one a universe of color, waiting to be mixed with egg yolk to become paint. He did not touch them, only inhaled their presence, letting their story fill his senses. But beneath the earthy scents was another, more ethereal fragrance. It was a faint, metallic tongue, a clean and ancient smell that seemed to sing with the memory of light. This was the scent of gold. Nestled in its own delicate compartment, protected by a sheet of thin parchment, lay the gold leaf. It was not a color, but a captured piece of the sun itself, hammered to an impossible thinness. He gently lifted the parchment, revealing a stack of the fragile sheets. The candlelight, which had until now been content to illuminate, now seemed to leap and dance upon the surface of the gold. It was a liquid light, a shimmering pool of warmth and brilliance. The gold leaf was so thin that a stray breath could send it fluttering. He felt a deep, abiding sense of awe in its presence. This was not merely a decorative element. It was a symbol of divine light, of sacred truth, of the glory of God made manifest on the page. Its faint, coppery tongue was a reminder of its earthly origins, yet its shine was a whisper of the celestial. He closed the lid of the box, sealing the precious scents and colors within. The air in the scriptorium, now a symphony of aromas, seemed to vibrate with a quiet energy. The earthy smell of pigment, the clean scent of vellum, the sweet perfume of beeswax, and the faint, metallic tang of gold all mingled together, a promise of the beauty that was to come. With the quill ready, the vellum waiting, and the colors prepared, Master William was ready to begin his nightly conversation with the divine, one brushstroke at a time. The air in the scriptorium was now a tapestry of scents, sweet beeswax, dry vellum, and the faint mineral breath of crushed pigments. Master William, with the careful preparation complete, felt a quiet anticipation rise within him. It was time for the central act of the evening, the alchemical transformation of dust into light. On a small, smooth piece of polished stone, his palette lay a tiny, precious amount of powdered gold. This was not the wafer-thin leaf he had seen moments before, but a fine, shimmering dust, painstakingly ground from gold coin. It lay on the stone like a captured sunbeam, each particle catching the candlelight with a pinprick of brilliant fire. It was the purest essence of light, waiting for its awakening. He took a single small egg from a basket on the floor, and, with a practiced tap, cracked it on the side of a clean clay bowl. The white, clear, and viscous, separated easily from the yolk. He took only a single small drop of the egg white, or glaire, as it was known, and placed it next to the gold dust on the palette stone. Now came the mixing. With a whisper of a movement, he took a tiny, hair-fine brush, its tip so delicate it seemed to be woven from moonbeams. He began to stir the gold dust and the glaire together. The sound was so faint, it was more a feeling than a sound, a gentle, almost inaudible asterisk, asterisk, underscore, shush, underscore, asterisk, asterisk, the whisper of brush against stone, of light against liquid. Slowly, the pale, translucent egg white began to change. It caught the gold dust, holding it in a swirling, luminous dance. At first, it looked like a cloudy film, but as he continued to mix, the concoction transformed. The particles of gold suspended themselves perfectly in the glaire, creating a liquid that seemed to hold its own inner light. It was no longer a simple mixture. It was a potion of captured brilliance. He watched the surface of the liquid gold paint. The candlelight, warm and steady, seemed to plunge into the depths of the mixture, illuminating the swirling flecks of gold. The light was not reflected from the paint, but seemed to emanate from within it, a soft, ethereal glow. The entire concoction shimmered, a living thing in the soft light. He raised the palette to his nose, and the scent was a revelation, a faint, clean smell of the glare mingling with the ancient metallic tang of the gold. It was a smell of purpose and promise, a fragrance of sacred art in the making. With the paint now perfectly prepared, he set the small brush aside. He took a moment, just a moment, to close his eyes and inhale the stillness of the room and the quiet magic he had just created. The gold on the palette was a small, glowing star in the center of his world. He was ready to begin. The final step was to take up the brush and begin the work of illumination, to bring the divine light to the waiting page. The golden mixture on the palette shimmered, a small, captured sunbeam in the quiet heart of the scriptorium. Its work would come later, but for now, the task was to lay the foundation, to create the perfect form that the light would one day adorn. Master William's hand, so sure and steady, reached for a different tool, one more humble than the quill or the brush, a small stick of lead point. The lead point was little more than a thin rod of lead encased in a small wooden holder. It was the whisper before the shout, the thought before the word. He held it with the same care as his other tools, its cool, smooth surface a familiar comfort in his fingers. He leaned forward, his face bathed in the warm, dancing light of the candles, and his gaze fell upon the waiting sheet of vellum. It lay before him, a blank, pristine world. With a slow, deliberate motion, he began to draw the first lines of text. The sound that filled the silence was a gentle, almost imperceptible scratch. It was the sound of soft metal against the smooth, prepared calfskin. It was not a sound that could be heard from across the room, but a sound that was felt in the air, a vibration of quiet purpose. Each line was a careful, measured action, a tiny prayer itself. He began with the border, the faint, ruled lines that would guide his hand and keep the letters in perfect alignment. He did not use a heavy hand. The lines were so light, so delicate, that they were barely visible. They were ghosts of lines, a promise of order. The lead point slid across the vellum, a faint friction, a rhythmic, lulling sound. Then he began to sketch the letters themselves. He started at the top of the page with the first word of the sacred text. He formed each letter with painstaking care. The curve of a C, the long, straight spine of an I, the perfect bowl of an O. Each was a faint, silvery line, a breath of a letter not yet fully born. The sound of the lead point was a soft, continuous melody in the quiet room. It was a sound that soothed the spirit, a sound of creation in its most nascent form. There was no permanence here, no commitment of ink, only the graceful, temporary form of the letters. He could erase these lines with a gentle rub of his thumb, but he would not need to. His hand had formed these letters 1,000 times before. He felt the rhythm of the work take hold of him, the steady, unhurried pace of a river flowing to the sea. The gentle scrape of the lead point, the soft flick of his wrist as he moved from one letter to the next, the quiet stillness of his concentration, all these things combined to form a moment of perfect peace. He was not rushing to fill the page, but simply allowing the letters to unfold, one by one, into being. The work was not a chore, but a meditation, a communion with the words themselves. He worked in this manner for a long time, the only sounds being the soft rustle of his robe and the quiet, continuous scratch of the lead point. The page slowly began to fill with the faint, beautiful forms of letters, a silent promise of the illuminated glory that was yet to come. In this moment of quiet sketching, the scriptorium was a sanctuary of peace, and Master William was a man at one with his work. With the faint, graceful forms of the letters sketched in lead point, the page lay ready for its transformation. The work of mere words was done. Now it was time for the sacred work of light. The gold, prepared with such care, waited patiently on the palette. Master William's hand, so steady and true, now reached for a new tool, a delicate, hair-fine brush, its tip tapered to an impossibly fine point. He dipped the tip of the brush into the glistening mixture of glare and gold dust. The liquid gold clung to the bristles, a tiny glowing jewel at the end of the brush. He brought it to the page, his breath held in a moment of pure concentration. The very air seemed to hold its breath with him. He began with the first letter of the first word, a large ornate I that would stand as a monument on the page. His hand was a marvel of control, moving with a slowness that felt both deliberate and utterly natural. He outlined the shape of the I with the liquid gold, the brush leaving a trail of shimmering light upon the vellum. The sound was not a sound at all, but a whisper of a feeling, a feather-light touch of bristle against the smooth calfskin. The gold paint, so luminous on the palette, seemed to intensify as it was applied. It did not sink into the vellum, but lay upon it, a raised, glowing line of pure brilliance. He carefully filled in the shape of the letter, each stroke of the brush adding to the growing pool of liquid light. The candlelight, his only companion, danced on the surface, making the gold seem to move and flow, a living river of fire upon the page. But this was not the final illumination. Now came the true magic. He reached for the box of pigments, and with a tiny, clean brush, carefully lifted a single, gossamer-thin sheet of gold leaf. It was so light, so delicate, that it seemed to have no substance at all. It floated on the bristles of the brush, a perfect square of captured sunlight. With infinite care, he brought the brush and the gold leaf to the letter he had just painted. The liquid glare on the page was still slightly tacky, a perfect adhesive. He held his breath, and with the most gentle of touches, he laid the gold leaf upon the wet surface. For a moment, nothing happened. The gold lay there, a thin, papery square. And slowly, as if by a will of its own, it began to adhere. The edges curled slightly, the surface settled, and with a soft, almost inaudible tear of surrender, it bonded with the glare. The paper-thin sheet was now a part of the vellum, a part of the illuminated letter. He carefully lifted the brush away, and there it was, the first letter of the first word, no longer a sketch, no longer a painted line, but a solid, beautiful form of pure gold. It was a small miracle, a moment of deep, quiet joy. The candlelight, which had before danced upon a painted line, now seemed to bow before this brilliant, shimmering surface. The gold did not just reflect the light. It held it. It amplified it. It seemed to create its own radiance. Master William let out the breath he had been holding. The air, which had been thick with tension, now felt light and free. The first letter was perfect. He would now let it rest, giving the glare time to dry and the gold a chance to set completely. The true illumination had begun, and the monastery, the scriptorium, and the quiet heart of the old scribe were now filled with the silent, golden presence of God's word made manifest. With the first gilded letter resting, a small sunbeam on the page, Master William turned his attention to the intricate dance of color. The gold was the light of the heavens, but the pigments were the beauty of the earth, and together they would tell the story. He took a fresh, clean brush, its bristles as soft as a whisper, and dipped it into a small pot of liquid paint. The color was a deep, sacred blue, the ultramarine born of ground lapis lazuli. He leaned in close, his shadow bowing over the page. The candlelight seemed to gather around his head, illuminating his work with an intense, focused glow. He began to paint a delicate vine, a scrollwork that would grow from the base of the golden eye and curl gracefully around its form. The brush moved with an unhurried confidence, each stroke a small act of devotion. The deep blue paint, mixed with egg yolk, flowed smoothly onto the vellum. It was a color so profound it seemed to absorb the light, to hold a piece of the night sky within its depths. The sound was the merest suggestion of a sound, a soft, damp brush as the wet pigment kissed the dry vellum. He worked slowly, patiently, building the form of the vine. The blue was not a flat color, but one with a subtle depth. He would layer a slightly lighter shade here, a darker shadow there, giving the vine a sense of weight and life. The candlelight, his partner in this dance, would catch the wet sheen of the paint, making the color seem to deepen and glow. After the blue was laid down, he cleaned his brush with a careful swish in a small cup of water. The rinse water clouded with the pigment, a beautiful temporary piece of art in its own right. He then reached for another pot, this one a brilliant, fiery red. This was the vermilion, a color of passion and life. With a new, clean brush, he began to paint the delicate, unfurling leaves and berries that would sprout from the blue vine. The red was a vivid counterpoint to the deep blue, a spark of pure energy against the serene calm of the night sky. The two colors, laid side by side, did not clash, but seemed to sing a quiet harmony. The sound was the same soft screech, but now it felt like a different note in the song, a new part of the story unfolding on the page. He would add a tiny dot of yellow here, a hint of green there, each small detail adding to the tapestry of the illumination. The process was not rushed. It was a meditation in color and form. He was not just painting a letter. He was painting a miniature world, a tiny cosmos where vines grew, leaves unfurled, and the light of heaven met the colors of the earth. The finished letter, now half illuminated, was a beautiful sight. The brilliant, flat gold of the eye was now framed by the deep, glowing blue and the vibrant red. It was a moment of deep satisfaction, a silent, humble pride in the work of his hands. He set his brushes aside, their work for the moment complete, and leaned back in his chair. The candlelight still danced on the page, but now it had something more to illuminate, something more to celebrate. It was time for the colors to dry, for the layers to set, for the beauty to become permanent. He was in no hurry. The night was long, and the work was a prayer. The deep red and sacred blue pigments had been laid upon the vellum, their colors now drying and deepening in the candlelight. The scrawl of the quill and the gentle scratch of the lead point had long since ceased. Now, in the heart of the night, a new kind of silence had fallen over the scriptorium, a rich, full silence born of patient work and quiet satisfaction. Master William, feeling the slow ache in his shoulders and the gentle thrum of his concentration, knew it was time for a moment of repose. From a small earthenware jar, kept warm by a simple charcoal brazier in the corner, he poured a measure of spiced wine into a heavy clay mug. The scent that rose from the mug was a fragrant cloud of cinnamon, clove, and something else, a hint of honey and dried fruit, a breath of warmth in the cool stone room. The mug was rough to the touch, its unglazed surface a familiar comfort in his hands. He took a slow, deep sip. The wine was warm and sweet, a small fire against the chill of the evening. It slid down his throat, carrying with it a wave of peaceful calm. It was a simple pleasure, but a profound one, a moment of nourishment for the body after the soul had been so deeply fed by the work. He closed his eyes for a moment, simply feeling the warmth of the mug and the gentle heat of the wine. When he opened his eyes again, his gaze settled upon the page before him. It was no longer a blank, empty expanse. It was now a tiny, growing world of color and light. The gold of the initial letter, once a wet, shimmering pool, had now set. Its surface was a solid, burnished mirror, reflecting the flickering candlelight in 1,000 tiny gleams. The deep blue of the vine seemed to hold the very memory of the twilight sky, and the vibrant red of the leaves were like tiny, glowing embers against the pale vellum. He did not study it with a critical eye, nor did he rush to continue his work. He simply gazed upon it. He saw not just a letter, but a prayer. He saw not just pigments, but a reverence for the sacred words they illuminated. The small golden pool on the page was a beacon, a focal point for all the quiet hours he had spent within these walls. The only sounds in the room were the slow, rhythmic dance of the candle flames and the soft, steady beat of his own heart. The air was a mixture of spiced wine and beeswax, a holy incense of rest and work. Master William took another slow sip of the warm wine, his eyes never leaving the luminous initial. In this moment, there was nothing else, only the old scribe, the gentle light, and the small, golden prayer taking shape on the page. The night was still long, but the work was good. The silence of the scriptorium, so deep and full, was now joined by a new voice. From outside, a change in the night air had arrived, announced not by a great storm, but by a gentle, insistent presence. A soft, steady drumming began on the lidded glass windows, a rhythmic patter that spoke of a slow, soaking rain. The sound was not jarring, but a beautiful new layer in the symphony of the night. Master William, with his warm mug now set aside, had returned to his work. The golden initial, a beacon of light on the page, had set completely, its burnished surface reflecting the candlelight with a serene confidence. He now turned his attention back to the text itself, to the long lines of Latin that would fill the vellum around the initial. He picked up the quill he had so meticulously prepared. The feel of its smooth shaft was a familiar comfort in his hand. He dipped the newly sharpened nib into a small, dark pot of ink. The ink, a deep, rich black, clung to the tip of the quill, a perfect, viscous bead. He began to write. The sound that now filled the scriptorium was a gentle, continuous asterisk, asterisk, underscore, scritch-scratch, underscore, asterisk, asterisk. It was the sound of the quill's tip moving across the smooth, taut surface of the vellum. It was a precise and rhythmic sound, each letter a small punctuation mark in the silence. The sound of the writing blended perfectly with the sound of the rain, a duet of purpose and peace. The asterisk, asterisk, underscore, scritch, scratch, underscore, asterisk, asterisk of the quill against the page was the human voice of creation, and the asterisk, asterisk, underscore, pitter-patter, underscore, asterisk, asterisk of the rain against the window was the voice of the natural world, both singing a song of slow, unhurried time. He did not rush. Each letter was formed with the same care as the last. He felt the words flow through his hand, from his mind onto the page. The beautiful black lines of ink unfurled beneath the flickering candlelight, a stark and elegant counterpoint to the vibrant colors and brilliant gold. The rain, a curtain of sound outside, seemed to deepen his focus, to pull him further into the quiet world he was creating on the page. The scent of the ink, earthy and slightly metallic, rose to meet the clean smell of the rain filtering in through the seams of the window. He was completely at one with his surroundings, the gentle flame of the candles, the rich smell of the materials, the rhythmic sounds of his work, and the world outside. The night was a sanctuary, and the scriptorium was its sacred heart. He wrote on, the scratching of his quill a steady, tranquil heartbeat, a constant presence in the deepening quiet of the rainy night. The steady pitter-patter of the rain on the lidded glass windows had become a constant, comforting rhythm, a soft drumbeat against the deep quiet of the night. The quill, its gentle scritch-scratch, a counterpoint to the rain, continued its patient work. The golden initial, now fully dried and brilliant, served as a quiet anchor on the page, the beginning of a sacred journey. Master William, with a line of black ink stretching across the vellum, paused his writing and turned his attention to a small, worn book on a stand beside him. This was his prayer book, a humble leather-bound volume, its pages softened and yellowed with the passage of many hands and many years. He opened it carefully, the leather sighing with a sound like old parchment. The book fell open naturally to a familiar page, a passage he had read and copied 1,000 times, yet one that still held a living truth for him. The text was in a different hand, the careful script of a long-dead brother, and it was to this hand that William now paid his reverence. He did not simply copy the words. He read them, first to himself in the deep silence of his mind, then he began to murmur them aloud. The words of the Latin prayer were a low, tranquil sound in the room, a whispered offering to the night. His voice was soft, husky with age and reverence, a gentle hum that blended with the sounds of the rain and the candles. Dies, qui ineffabili providentia, he began, the words a familiar melody on his lips. Omnia disponis. His eyes moved from the old book to his own vellum, and he began to copy the words his quill's gentle scratch, now guided not just by his eye, but by the memory of the prayer in his heart. Each letter he formed was an echo of the word he had just spoken. The act of writing was not separate from the act of prayer. They were one and the same. He felt the weight and the grace of the words as he copied them, the D of Dies taking shape under his hand as a small, humble monument to God. The V of verbum was a pointed prayer, the I of incipit a straight line of devotion. The murmuring continued, a quiet background melody to the rhythm of his work. The scent of old paper and leather from the prayer book mingled with the clean smell of the vellum and the sweet smoke of the beeswax. He was not alone in the scriptorium. He was in the company of the holy text and of the long line of scribes who had carried this same prayer through the centuries. He copied on the soft scratch of his quill and the low murmur of his voice, a continuous soothing sound in the deep quiet. He was a link in a chain of faith, a vessel for the words, and his work was not merely to create a beautiful object, but to carry a prayer from one heart to another across the chasm of time. His work for the night was not yet done, but it was already a prayer made manifest, an illuminated whisper in the dark. The gentle sounds of the scriptorium continued, a quiet harmony of the quill's steady scratch, the soft murmur of prayer, and the tranquil drumming of the rain. Master William, deep in the rhythm of his work, felt a profound sense of peace. His gaze, though focused on the page, was also open to the small, beautiful details of the night. It was then that a new visitor arrived. Through a barely perceptible crack in the lidded glass, a small moth, drawn by the warmth and light, drifted into the room. Its presence was a silent, fluttering whisper against the stillness. It moved without a sound, a tiny gray-brown shadow against the dark stone walls. The moth's flight was not a frantic dash, but a slow, hesitant dance. It moved through the air, drawn irresistibly toward the small, glowing beacons of the beeswax candles. Its delicate wings, dusted with a fine, downy powder, seemed to absorb the light as it passed. For a moment, its small body was illuminated, a brief, fragile star caught in the golden halo of the flame. Master William paused his writing, his quill held still above the page. He watched the moth's journey with a quiet reverence. The creature did not touch the flame, but simply circled it, drawn by its warmth and brilliance. It was a fleeting moment, a tiny testament to the power of light in the darkness. The moth's wings, catching the glow for a fraction of a second, were a beautiful, fragile echo of the golden initial on his page. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the moth drifted away from the light. It moved into the deeper shadows of the room, its small, fluttering form swallowed by the cool, dark air near the vaulted ceiling. Its journey was complete, its momentary communion with the light now a memory. Master William's gaze returned to his work, his hand falling back into the familiar rhythm of the quill. The moth's brief visit was a small reminder of the ephemeral nature of life, and of the enduring beauty of light, both in the heavens and in the humble glow of a beeswax candle. The scripture he was copying was not just a collection of words, but a living light against the vastness of the darkness, a hope to which all souls, like a moth to a flame, were ultimately drawn. With a soft sigh of contentment, he continued his work, his quill scratching on, a quiet, constant presence in the peaceful heart of the night. The night deepened, and with it, a subtle chill began to creep into the scriptorium, a natural counterpoint to the warmth of the candles. The rain's soft drumming was a constant lullaby, and the old scribe's work, a quiet symphony of quill and vellum, continued its patient unfolding. Master William, though lost in the rhythm of his task, felt a small, familiar resistance from his tools. The ink, cooled by the night air, was becoming slightly less fluid, its flow across the parchment no longer as smooth as it should be. He paused his writing. The quill held still for a moment, and turned his attention to the small, dark pot of ink. He knew from long experience that ink, like a good wine, needed to be cared for, to be kept at just the right temperature. Without a word, his long, paint-stained fingers picked up the small pot and brought it close to a candle flame. He did not hold it in the flame, of course, but just near enough for the gentle heat to do its work. The warmth of the candle began its slow caress of the clay pot. The air, already fragrant with beeswax, now carried a new faint scent, the earthy, slightly metallic tongue of the ink as it began to warm. He took a tiny, clean wooden stick and dipped it into the pot, stirring the ink with a slow, deliberate motion. The sound was a soft, wet schloop, a quiet, viscous sigh as the liquid moved. As he stirred, he watched the surface of the ink. The color, a deep, rich black, seemed to deepen and smooth out, its texture becoming more uniform. The tiny air bubbles that had formed on its surface disappeared, and the ink took on a new life, a rich, dark luster that promised a smooth, beautiful line. The warmth from the candle was a gift, a small act of reverence for the material he used. He watched the ink for a long while, the stick moving in a slow, circular dance. The gentle warmth seemed to restore not just the ink, but his own spirit. It was a moment of quiet connection with his craft, a small, humble ritual that reminded him that every detail mattered, every tool and every material had a part to play in the sacred work. Finally, the ink was ready. He set the pot back in its place on the desk, its surface now smooth and dark, a perfect mirror for the candlelight. He picked up his quill again, its nib eager for the fresh, warm ink. He dipped it once more, the bead of ink clinging to the tip with a perfect liquid grace. The first stroke on the vellum was a smooth, effortless line. The sound of the quill's scratch was now a clean, unblemished whisper, a testament to the brief, quiet ritual of warmth and patience he had just performed. The work continued, as it always did, with a renewed sense of purpose and grace. The gentle work of the quill and the soft murmur of the rain had continued for what seemed like a long time. Master William's page was slowly, beautifully filling with the graceful black letters of the sacred text. But his eye was always drawn back to the top of the page, to the brilliant golden initial. It was a beacon, a small sun in the quiet night. Now, as he worked, he noticed a new change in the gold. The liquid glare and gold dust mixture he had applied earlier had begun to dry completely. It was no longer a wet, shimmering pool, but a solid, textured surface. He leaned closer, holding his head just so in the candlelight, and saw a subtle transformation. The gold was no longer a flat color. The tiny particles of gold dust, held in suspension by the egg white, had settled into a faintly raised surface. He ran a single reverent finger over the area, not touching the gold itself, but feeling the slight, almost imperceptible bump of the illumination. The texture was a beautiful, imperfect testament to its handmade origin. He brought the candle closer, watching the play of light upon the surface. The gold did not reflect the light with a single, uniform glare. Instead, it caught the flame and broke it into 1,000 tiny points of light. It was as if 1,000 tiny, captured embers lay upon the vellum, each one holding a piece of the candle's soul. The light did not just bounce off the surface. It seemed to be held within it, a deep, inner glow that spoke of warmth and sacred fire. The effect was not a brilliant flash, but a soft, gentle luminescence. It was a humble kind of glory, one that did not shout, but whispered of its beauty. The gold was not just a color. It was a texture, a feeling, a prayer made tangible. He was no longer working with a flat page, but with a piece of art that had a beautiful raised dimension. He returned to his writing, the rhythmic scratch of the quill, a quiet counterpoint, to the silent, glowing presence of the gold. The sight of the shimmering initial filled him with a deep, abiding contentment. He knew that when the morning came and the light of the sun poured through the high windows, the gold would truly come alive. But for now, in the quiet heart of the night, it was a gentle, beautiful promise of light to come. The work was good, the night was peaceful, and the gold on the page was a small, glowing ember of prayer. With the gilded initial, now a quiet monument on the page, and the black text flowing gracefully below it, Master William turned his attention to a small new world beginning to take shape in the margins. The rain continued its patient drumming on the window pane, a peaceful soundtrack to the evening's work. The candlelight flickered, its gentle glow revealing a small, empty space just beside the text. Here, on a narrow strip of vellum, he would bring a small piece of the living world to life. He reached for his finest brush, its tip made of just a few strands of hair, and a small pot of earth-tinged pigments. He began to paint a tiny bird, a humble creature that would perch on the end of a painted vine. He did not rush, but worked with a meticulous, unhurried hand. The first layer of paint was a pale, creamy brown, a base coat for the body. The brush made no sound, its touch so light it seemed to breathe the color onto the page. Slowly, ever so slowly, he began to add new layers. A slightly darker shade of brown for the bird's head and back, a soft, creamy white for its tiny breast. He used his brush to create the illusion of individual feathers, building the texture with a series of tiny, delicate strokes. The candlelight caught the wet paint, making the colors shine for a moment before they settled into a soft, velvety finish. He paused, holding the brush still to let a layer dry before adding the next. He worked in a silent, absorbed concentration. The only sound in the room was the gentle ticking of the rain and the slow, steady rhythm of his own breathing. He was a creator in a world of his own making, a divine miniaturist bringing life to a tiny, empty space. He painted a small black dot for the bird's eye, a point of pure black that gave the creature a sense of alertness and life. He added a tiny, delicate foot, its 3 toes wrapped around the painted vine with a perfect, fragile grip. The finished bird was no more than an inch in size, but within that small space, a world of life and beauty existed. Its feathers were so delicately shaded, its form so perfectly rendered, that it seemed to be a real creature, poised to take flight from the page. It was a humble, silent prayer of life, a small testament to the beauty of God's creation. He leaned back, the work for the moment complete, and gazed upon the tiny, perfect bird. The flickering candlelight made it seem to flutter, a small breathing heart in the margin of the sacred text. The gentle chill of the deep night had finally found its way into the scriptorium. The charcoal in the small brazier was now just a memory of warmth, a scattering of gray embers. The beeswax candles burned down low in their pewter holders, cast longer, more dancing shadows, their warmth now a faint memory of the evening's start. The rain, however, continued its quiet, rhythmic drumming, a tranquil and steady presence against the window. Master William, lost in the patient rhythm of his work, felt the coolness seep into the very stones of the floor and walls. He felt a soft shiver, a gentle reminder that even within this warm sanctuary, the night was a powerful, enveloping force. Without breaking the flow of his work, he reached for the heavy woolen robe that lay folded over the back of his chair. It was a simple garment of undyed wool, worn soft from years of use, smelling faintly of clean sheep and old age. With a slow, deliberate movement, he drew the robe tighter around his shoulders. The coarse, familiar fabric was a welcome comfort, a soft, warm weight against the chill. The movement was a quiet interruption, a small, humble act of self-care in the midst of his sacred duty. The fabric settled around him, a new layer of warmth that did not break his concentration, but seemed to deepen it. The scratch of his quill continued, a steady, unhurried sound in the deep quiet. He was a small, warm island of life and light in a sea of cool stone and night air. He felt a profound sense of connection to his work, to the ancient words he was copying, to the patient rhythm of the seasons and the slow turning of the night. The warmth of the wool and the coolness of the air were not in opposition, but in a quiet harmony, a natural balance of the world he inhabited. He looked at the page once more, at the beautiful illuminated letter, the intricate bird, and the perfect lines of text. The work was still far from done, but the progress was a prayer in itself. The cold could not touch the warmth of the gold, nor could it dim the light of the words. He was a humble servant of a long and holy tradition, and with his woolen robe drawn tight against the night, he continued his patient, peaceful work. The night was cold, but the heart of the scriptorium was full of warmth and light. The chill of the scriptorium had deepened, but Master William's quiet concentration was a source of unyielding warmth. The finished portion of his work, the shimmering gold, the delicate bird, the flowing black script, was now a comforting presence on the page. Yet the work of illumination was a slow and painstaking process, and a new need had arisen. The deep, sacred blue, the ultramarine that he used for his vines and initials, had been depleted. It was time for the humble yet sacred ritual of preparing a new batch. He rose from his chair, its ancient wood sighing with a soft complaint, and moved to a small stone table in the corner of the room. On it rested a small, heavy mortar of carved stone and a polished, smooth pestle. Beside it lay a small, rough piece of lapis lazuli. The stone was a deep, mottled blue, shot through with veins of white calcite and flecks of glittering gold pyrite. It was a stone that seemed to hold a piece of the night sky within its form. With a slow, careful motion, he placed a small fragment of the stone into the mortar. He took up the pestle, its smooth, heavy head a familiar weight in his hand. He began to grind. The sound was a hard, rhythmic click, clack of stone against stone, a sound of earth and permanence. It was a sound that spoke of the ages, of the slow, geologic process that had created the very material he was now about to transform. He worked slowly, without force, allowing the weight of the pestle to do its work. The sound changed as the stone began to break apart, becoming a softer, more rhythmic thump-thump as the fragments were reduced to a coarse powder. He leaned in, and a new scent rose from the mortar of the dry, stony smell of the mineral, a cool, ancient fragrance that was the essence of the earth itself. He continued to grind, his hand moving in a slow, circular dance. The sound became a fine, gritty whisper, a soft shush-shush as the powder was reduced to a fine, deep blue dust. He was a humble alchemist, turning a hard, unyielding stone into a soft, vibrant color that would bring a piece of heaven to the page. Finally, the powder was as fine as he could make it. He stopped, and the silence that followed was deep and full. He looked into the mortar, at the small, dark pool of blue dust, its color so deep it seemed to absorb the candlelight. It was no longer a rough stone, but a promise of beauty and devotion. He would now carefully scrape the powder into a small pot, and with the glare of egg yolk, it would become the luminous ultramarine paint once more. With this simple, ancient act of preparation, the night's work was renewed, and a small piece of the heavens was ready to be placed on the waiting vellum. The deep blue dust now rested in a small, precious pile, ready for its transformation into paint. But as Master William turned from his mortar, a new challenge arose from the cold heart of the night. A stray draft, a soft, invisible breath of cold air, had found its way into the scriptorium, a whisper of the world outside. The nearest candle, a small, stubborn flame that had burned so faithfully all night, began to waver. The flame did not go out, but it danced and flickered, its light casting a frantic, shifting pattern of shadows upon the wall. The golden initial, which had been a still, serene presence, now seemed to leap and shimmer with an unholy energy. The delicate work of the brush and the eye could not continue in such a chaotic light. Without a moment's hesitation, Master William's hand moved, an instinct born of years of caring for these precious, humble flames. He shielded the candle with his broad palm, creating a small, warm cave around the wick. The draft, so quick and cold, was stopped by the warmth of his skin. The flame, freed from the wind's dance, stilled. It burned bright and clear once more, a single, unwavering point of light in the quiet dark. He held his hand there for a long moment, feeling the gentle heat of the flame against his skin. It was a profound and simple connection, the warmth of his body protecting the light that allowed his soul to do its work. The moment was a quiet prayer in itself, a testament to the symbiotic relationship between the scribe and his tools, between the human and the divine. With the flame now steady, he slowly, carefully moved his hand away, his work as a shield complete. He then picked up his delicate brush once more, its tip now dipped in the freshly made liquid gold. The work to be done was the gilding, the application of the paper-thin gold leaf to the final initial on the page. This required the steadiest of hands and the most unwavering of lights. He brought the brush to the vellum, his hand as steady as a rock in the newly restored calm. He began to apply the thinnest of glare washes to the shape of the letter, a clear and sticky foundation for the gold to come. The sound was a whisper, a silent prayer of concentration. The flame, now still and serene, cast a perfect, golden light upon his work, a silent partner in his sacred task. The draft was forgotten, the chaos vanquished, and the patient, peaceful work of illumination continued in the quiet sanctuary of the scriptorium. The deep quiet of the scriptorium, so full of small, gentle sounds, was now joined by a new resonant presence. From far off, from the bell tower that stood as the monastery's stone heart, the sound of the great bell began to toll. It was the hour of midnight, the solemn and sacred turn of the day. The first chime was a deep, low hum, a rich, powerful vibration that seemed to travel not just through the air, but through the very earth and stone of the cloister. It reached the scriptorium as a faint, distant resonance, a slow, deep breath of sound that seemed to pass through the walls. Master William felt it more than he heard it, a subtle tremor in the worn wood of his desk, a vibration in the quiet air around him. The second chime followed, then the third, each one a slow, measured beat against the night. The sound was a reminder of the larger world beyond his desk, of the passage of time, of the quiet, sleeping town, and the vast, unseeable fields beyond. The chimes were a counterpoint to the soft drumming of the rain and the tiny, persistent scratch of his quill. He paused his work, his hand holding the quill still, and listened. He did not rush, but allowed the sound to wash over him, to fill the quiet chamber with its deep, reverent voice. The chimes were a prayer in themselves, a solemn blessing on the passing night. The sound, so profound yet so distant, seemed to connect his small, solitary act of creation to the larger, eternal rhythm of the universe. The 12th chime rang out, its voice as deep and full as the first. The sound hung in the air for a long moment, a slow, fading echo that seemed to linger even after it was gone. The silence that followed was not empty, but was filled with the memory of the bells, a quiet reverence that held the last echoes of their tolling. Master William let out a long, slow breath. The day was over, and the new one had begun, and still his work continued. The bells were a reminder of the ceaseless passage of time, but his work was a quiet act of defiance against it, a small, beautiful attempt to make a moment of holy truth last forever. With the last echo of the bells now faded into the deep quiet of the night, he dipped his quill once more into the rich, dark ink and continued his patient, peaceful work. The midnight bells had long since faded, and the gentle patter of the rain had finally softened to a quiet, occasional drip from the eaves. The scriptorium was now a place of deep, settled peace. The long hours of the night had borne fruit, and a stack of pages, each a beautiful tapestry of black ink, luminous gold, and vibrant color, lay finished beside Master William's desk. The work for the night was at an end. He stood up from his chair, a slow, tired sigh escaping his lips. He moved to the pages with a gentle reverence, his hands once again the tools of a different final ritual. He took the finished pages and with the utmost care stacked them one upon another. The vellum was still cool from the night air, its surface a perfect blend of smoothness and a slight, textured roughness from the dried paints and the faintly raised gold. He ran a hand over the finished stack, feeling the subtle weight of the pages. The black lines of text, the shimmering initials, and the delicate marginalia were now a single, cohesive body of work. The words had been given form, and the light had been given a home. From a shelf nearby, he took two smooth, thick boards of unvarnished wood. They were the size of the pages, and their purpose was to act as a gentle press. He placed one board on the bottom, a solid, flat foundation for the finished pages. Then, with a patient and steady hand, he laid the stack of vellum squarely upon it. He ran his hand over the top page, smoothing out any last hint of a curl or a wrinkle. Finally, he placed the second wooden board on top of the pages. He pressed down on it gently with the flats of his hands, a final, calming benediction upon the work. Then, from the same shelf, he took a small, heavy stone, its surface smooth and rounded from years of use. It was a simple stone, but its weight was profound. He placed it squarely in the center of the top board. The pages were now bound, protected between the two boards, and held under the gentle, constant pressure of the stone. The purpose was to keep the vellum flat and true, to ensure that the work of the night would be preserved perfectly for the day. The sound of the finished ritual was a deep, satisfied silence. The work of the hands was complete. The hours of patient labor were now held in a simple, beautiful press. He stood there for a long moment, his gaze resting on the wooden boards and the small, heavy stone. It was a monument to the evening's quiet devotion. The candles, now mere stubs, flickered one last time before he gently snuffed them out. The scriptorium plunged into darkness, a darkness filled not with emptiness, but with the quiet, brilliant presence of a holy work, waiting for the coming dawn. The scriptorium was now a place of deep, settled peace, the night far advanced. The finished pages, now pressed under their weight, held the quiet promise of the morning. Master William, though tired, felt a final surge of creative energy, a last act of reverence before he, too, would seek his rest. He returned to his desk, to the last remaining page on which he had worked, and to the final flourishes that would complete its journey from vellum to holy text. The margins of the page, once blank and empty, were now a canvas for his final act of artistry. He picked up his finest brush, its tip so small it seemed to disappear into the air, and a pot of light, earthy green pigment. He began to paint tiny leaves, a small, intricate garden growing along the borders of the page. The brush moved with an almost imperceptible grace, leaving a trail of beautiful, delicate green. The sound was not a sound, but a feeling, the softest whisper of a hair against the vellum. He worked slowly, patiently, allowing the leaves to unfold one by one. Each one was a small, quiet prayer of creation, a tiny testament to the beauty of the natural world. He added small, crimson berries, each one a pinpoint of brilliant red against the green. The colors were not loud, but soft and harmonious, a gentle celebration of the living world that existed just beyond the stone walls of the scriptorium. He would add a hint of gold here, a subtle touch of the precious metal to the edges of a leaf, making it shimmer in the candlelight. He would paint a small, impossibly perfect flower, its petals a soft, creamy white. He was not just painting a decoration. He was weaving a story, a silent, beautiful conversation between the sacred words and the humble life of the earth. The finished margins were a tapestry of life, a beautiful, delicate frame for the text. The tiny leaves curled and grew, the flowers bloomed in an endless spring, and the entire page seemed to breathe with a quiet, holy life. It was a beautiful, peaceful way to end the night's work, not with a final, booming word, but with a quiet, delicate whisper of grace. With the last leaf painted and the final berry placed, he laid his brush down. The work was complete. The night was now a silent, holy space, a place of peace and beauty, waiting for the gentle arrival of the dawn. The deep night was now a quiet friend, the rains drumming a distant memory. The pages, finished and pressed, awaited the dawn. But a final, small act remained before Master William could seek his rest. One by one, the candles, his faithful companions through the long hours, had burned down low. Their flames, no longer robust, were beginning to struggle, their wicks growing long and black, causing them to flicker and gutter. The scent of the scriptorium had changed once more. The sweet, warm perfume of fresh beeswax had given way to a faint, acrid scent of burnt wick, the telltale sign of a tired flame. Master William, with a quiet sigh, reached for a small pair of snuffers, a tool as simple and essential as his quill. The metallic snuffer was cool to the touch, its long handles a familiar feel in his tired hands. He did not extinguish the flames yet, but performed a last gentle service. He held the snuffer carefully over the first candle. The tiny scissor-like blades, designed to hold the snipped-off wick, were poised for a quick, precise action. He leaned in, and with a soft ****snip_*****, he trimmed the long carbonized end of the wick. A small wisp of dark smoke rose and dissipated into the air, and with it, the scent of burning soot. Immediately, the flame responded. It no longer flickered and danced, but burned bright and clear once more. The candle, given a clean new edge to its wick, now burned with a steady, gentle strength. The air, which had briefly held the smell of burnt wick, now filled again with the sweet, pure fragrance of melting beeswax. He moved to the next candle, and the next, performing the same simple, quiet ritual. Each soft snip was followed by the welcome return of the steady, clean flame and the sweet, comforting scent of the wax. It was a final act of care, a loving farewell to the light that had guided his hands through the night. The scent of the melting wax was a holy perfume, a final blessing on his work. The scriptorium, now filled with the light of these newly trimmed flames and the soft fragrance of the melting wax, felt at peace. His work was done, his tools at rest. The candles, his humble and beautiful companions, now burned with a quiet, confident light, ready to stand guard over the pages until the sun rose to take their place. He was ready for sleep, his mind a quiet sanctuary, filled with the memory of the night's work and the beautiful, warm scent of the wax. The scent of beeswax, a final beautiful blessing on the night, filled the air. The pages of the completed work were now at rest, and the candles, their flames steady and bright, stood watch. Master William, though tired, felt a new wave of purpose. The night was still long, and a new sheet of vellum, a fresh, empty world, awaited his touch. He took a new sheet from the stack he had prepared earlier and laid it flat upon his desk. The vellum, still a bit raw and unfinished, had a slight nap to its surface, a subtle texture that needed to be perfected before the quill could begin its dance. He reached for a small, fist-sized piece of pumice stone. The stone was a beautiful, light gray, its surface full of 1,000 tiny, porous holes. It was as light as a feather, a stone born of fire and air, and it was a tool of incredible delicacy. He held the stone in the palm of his hand, and with a slow, almost caressing motion, began to smooth the surface of the vellum. The sound was a soft, continuous whisper, a gentle shush of stone against skin. It was the sound of preparation, of a final act of refinement. He felt the subtle resistance of the vellum as he worked, the tiny fibers of the calfskin being pushed down, made smooth and perfect. The pumice stone, with its 1,000 tiny pores, worked like 1,000 tiny fingertips, polishing the surface with an unparalleled gentleness. He worked in slow, careful circles, moving his hand from the center of the page to the edges. He felt the vellum change beneath his touch, its surface transforming from a soft, fuzzy texture to a smooth, queeny plane, ready to receive the ink and the gold. He paused and held the page up to the candlelight. The light, which had once been diffuse and scattered by the rougher surface, now lay upon the vellum with a clean, unblemished clarity. The page was now a perfect, pale cream, a blank canvas waiting for the sacred words. The scent of the pumice, a dry, mineral fragrance, lingered in the air, a final earthly offering before the divine work could begin anew. With the page now perfectly prepared, he laid the pumice stone back in its place. He took a new quill, dipped it in the fresh, warm ink, and looked at the pristine vellum. The night was still his. The work of his hands was a continuous prayer, a cycle of preparation, devotion, and creation. And now, in the deep quiet of the late night, a new prayer was ready to be born. The work, always a comfort and a joy, was about to begin once more. The night had grown old, and the rain had finally subsided, leaving behind a world of hushed quiet and the soft, steady drip from the eaves. Master William, lost in the rhythm of his work, was now a silent anchor in a sea of peace. The candles, freshly trimmed, cast a pure, warm light, and the quill's gentle scratch on the newly prepared vellum was the only sound of his own making. But from far down the long stone corridor, a new sound began to drift into the scriptorium. It was the faintest of hums, a low, resonant melody that seemed to be carried on the cool night air. It was a song, sung in a choir of voices, a sound that spoke of a holy vigil being kept in the chapel. The lauds, a prayer for the coming of the dawn, had begun. The sound was not loud or intrusive, but a distant, ethereal presence. It was a melody of faith and hope, a beautiful, wordless prayer that wove itself into the very fabric of the scriptorium silence. The soft, collective hum of the brothers' voices was a beautiful complement to the tiny, individual sound of the quill. It was the voice of the community, singing its prayer in harmony with the solitary prayer of the scribe. Master William's hand did not falter, but the sound of the psalm seemed to fill his soul with a quiet strength. The scratching of his quill now felt like a part of a larger, more beautiful song. The rhythm of his writing matched the slow, deliberate pace of the chant. He was no longer just a solitary scribe. He was a part of a larger choir, a member of a holy community, and his work was a small, beautiful verse in their grand, night-long hymn of praise. The song hummed on, its soft melody a constant, comforting presence in the quiet chamber. The air, already a beautiful mixture of vellum and beeswax, now held the spiritual scent of devotion. The night was drawing to a close, and the dawn was soon to arrive. But for now, in the final, peaceful hours of the night, Master William worked on, his quill a silent voice in the beautiful, low hum of the midnight song. The night was now a deep, still pool of quiet, filled with the faint hum of the distant psalm and the gentle, persistent scratch of the quill. Master William, lost in the patient rhythm of his work, felt his hand, for a moment, falter. The long hours, the late night, the unwavering focus all conspired to create a brief, almost imperceptible tremor. And in that brief moment, the world of perfection he was creating on the page was broken. A bead of rich, dark ink, clinging to the nib of his quill, lost its hold. It fell onto the vellum with a soft, tiny plop, a black, ugly stain on the beautiful, clean page. The sound was a sharp, discordant note in the night's symphony. Master William's hand stilled. He did not sigh in frustration or despair. There was no anger, only a quiet, deep acceptance. He looked at the ink blot, a tiny, dark blemish on the otherwise pristine vellum, and felt no panic. Imperfection was a part of life, and it was a part of the holy work. The art was not in avoiding the mistake, but in patiently and gracefully repairing it. He reached for a small, sharp scalpel, a tool of both a surgeon and a scribe, its blade honed to a razor's edge. With the utmost care, he held the vellum flat and began to scrape away the ink. The sound was a fine, soft shush of steel against the smooth calfskin. He did not press hard, but worked with a light, deft touch, shaving away the top stained layer of the vellum, one infinitesimal piece at a time. The work was slow, painstaking, and required a patience born of deep devotion. He scraped until the vellum beneath was a soft, pale cream once more, a faint, almost invisible patch where the inkblot had been. He ran his fingertip over the area, feeling the slight, subtle difference in the texture, the smooth, newly revealed surface of the calfskin. The blemish was gone, but its memory remained, a small, quiet story of a human mistake and a divine act of repair. He took his quill once more, dipped it in a rich, dark ink, and with a hand now steadier than before, he carefully began to write, his hand moving over the repaired patch with a graceful confidence. The newly written letters flowed beautifully over the mended vellum, a testament to the power of patience and redemption. The night, once briefly broken by a single drop of ink, was now made whole once more, and the quiet, peaceful work of the scribe continued, a beautiful and humbling testament to the grace of imperfection. The scriptorium was now a sanctuary of deep, settled peace. The small, quiet drama of the inkblot and its patient repair was now a beautiful memory woven into the page. Master William, feeling the peaceful hum of a night's work well done, was at last ready for a moment of quiet contemplation. The gentle, distant hum of the psalm had faded, and only the quiet, steady breath of the candlelight remained. He set his quill down, its work now complete for the night, and leaned back slightly in his chair. He took the page he had worked on, its ink now dry and its pigments set, and held it up in the soft, golden light. He did not look at it as a scribe now, but as an admirer, a witness to the beauty that had been born from his hands. He turned the page this way and that, allowing the light to play across the surface. The gold, which had once been a flat, brilliant pool, now had a rich, beautiful dimension. It seemed to come alive in the candlelight, catching the flame and breaking it into 1,000 tiny sparks of light. The gold of the initials seemed to leap from the page, a small, radiant sun. He felt no pride in this, but a quiet reverence, a deep and abiding awe that something so beautiful could be created from something so humble. His gaze moved to the pigments. The deep blue, born from the rough stone, now held a piece of the night sky within its form, its color so profound it seemed to drink the light. The vibrant red was a small holy fire against the pale vellum, a spark of passion and life. He ran his hand over the page, not touching the work, but feeling the palpable presence of the art that had been made. He saw the way the blue vine seemed to curl and grow toward the gold, the way the red berries seemed to glow in the half-light. It was a beautiful, silent conversation between color and light, between the earth and the heavens. The page was no longer just vellum and ink. It was a prayer made manifest, a testament to the patient work of a human hand and the unending grace of the divine. He held the page for a long moment, simply admiring its quiet beauty. The work was finished, the night was old, and he was filled with a deep, peaceful contentment. The interplay of gold and pigment was a silent hymn, a final, beautiful blessing on the night. He was not just a scribe. He was a silent witness to a beautiful, holy truth. And with that thought, he was ready to rest. The final act of admiration complete, Master William gently placed the page aside. The candlelight, his faithful companion through the long night, cast a soft, warm glow that was now the only light in the chamber. He prepared to extinguish the flame, to finally surrender to the deep peace that awaited him. But as he reached for the snuffers, the world outside, so long a partner in his quiet symphony, offered one final magnificent chord. The soft, rhythmic drumming on the leaded glass windows, which had been a constant, comforting presence, ceased. The last gentle drip from the eaves was a single, final punctuation mark, and then there was a profound, new silence. And with the silence, a new light was born. The moon, long hidden behind the clouds, had emerged in the deep velvet of the sky, a slender, ethereal shaft of moonlight, a silver blade of light, cut through the high, arched window of the scriptorium. It was not a warm, dancing light like the candles, but a cool, still, and otherworldly glow. The moonlight fell upon the stone floor, painting a pale, luminous rectangle on the cold, worn flagstones. It reached toward his desk, touching the edges of the vellum with a soft, silvery edge. The room, which had been a world of golden warmth and flickering shadows, was now a place of cool, serene light. The dust motes, which had danced in the candlelight, now seemed to hang motionless, like tiny frozen stars in the moon's quiet glow. Master William stood up, his tired body moving slowly in the ethereal light. He walked to the window, his form a tall, dark silhouette against the silvered glass. He saw the world outside, no longer shrouded in a veil of rain, but bathed in the beautiful, silent glory of the moonlight. He could see the dark, wet outline of the cloister, the sleeping roofs of the monastery, and the distant, silvered line of the hills. He turned back to the room, to the quiet duel of light that now existed between the soft, warm glow of his candles and the cool, serene presence of the moonlight. It was a beautiful final moment of the night. The work of the hands was done. The work of the soul was complete. The world was at rest, and so was he. With a quiet sigh of peace, he stood in the silvered light of the moon, a patient, humble scribe at the end of a long, holy night. The cool moonlight now filled the scriptorium, a final, silent presence in the long night. The soft, golden light of the candles was now a memory, their wicks snuffed, their warmth a beautiful echo. The pages, a testament to the patient work of the hours, lay at rest, their stories told. Master William, standing in the silvered light of the moon, felt a profound and complete peace. The work for the night was finally, truly at its end. He stood before his desk, its surface a world of ink, vellum, and memory. The last page, the final passage he had been working on, lay open before him. The quill, its nib still stained with the last bit of black ink, was held lightly in his fingers. The last letter, a small, humble ses at the end of a long, sacred word, was waiting for its completion. He brought the quill to the vellum. The moon, a silent witness, cast a cool, clear light upon his hand and the page. With a final, slow, deliberate motion, he completed the stroke of the letter. The sound was a last, soft scritch, a whisper of a sound that held all the devotion and all the patient work of the long night within it. The S was a small, perfect curve, a final punctuation mark on the sacred text. And then the quill's motion ceased. It came to a graceful, final stop. The hand that had worked with such unwavering purpose for so many hours was now still. The silence that followed was not an empty silence, but a full one, a quiet that was a culmination of all the small sounds of the night, the rain, the bells, the grinding of the stone, the gentle scratching of the quill. Master William's head bowed slightly. A long, slow breath escaped his lips, a gentle exhalation of the day's last effort. He held the quill for a moment more, feeling the familiar weight of the tool, a final connection to the sacred work he had just completed. Then, with a quiet sigh of deep contentment, he laid it gently on the desk, its work for the night done. The page was complete. The book was a step closer to its final form. The night had been a holy one, and the old scribe, standing in the quiet moonlight, was at peace. The cool, silvery light of the moon filled the scriptorium, a final serene blessing on the long night. The quill, its last task complete, lay at rest on the desk. Master William, standing in the quiet glow, felt a deep sense of peace. The sacred work was done, and now came the final humble ritual of putting the world of his craft to sleep. He began with his quills, their once sharp tips now dulled by the long hours of writing. He took each quill and dipped its nib into a small, clean pot of water, rinsing away the last traces of the rich, dark ink. The sound was a soft, silent swish of feather through water. He then carefully dried each quill with a soft, clean cloth, his fingers feeling the smooth shaft of the feather. One by one, he returned them to their leather pouch, where they would rest until the next night's work. Next were the brushes, their fine, delicate tips, a beautiful tapestry of color. He took each brush and, with the utmost care, rinsed it in a small bowl of water. The water clouded with the last vestiges of red, blue, and green, a final, beautiful testament to the evening's illumination. He then dried each brush with a clean cloth, gently shaping the bristles back to their original, perfect point. He returned them to their small, carved wooden box, where they would wait for the next time he would call upon them to bring color to the page. He then turned to the pots of pigments. The ultramarine, the vermilion, the malachite, all were now a bit diminished, a bit lighter, their beauty now a part of the illuminated pages. He checked each pot, ensuring its lid was sealed tight, protecting the precious dust within from the air and from the morning light. He returned the pots to their place in the dark wooden box, a final act of care for the humble, earthly colors that had helped him create a piece of the divine. The final task was the most personal. He took the heavy stone mortar and pestle he had used to grind the lapis lazuli and rinsed them with a gentle cloth, removing the last traces of the deep blue dust. The stone, now clean and pristine, was a silent testament to the work it had performed. He laid it back in its place on the small stone table, ready for the next time it would be called upon to turn stone into sky. With all his tools now clean and at rest, the desk was once again a place of quiet order. The scriptorium, in the soft, silver light of the moon, was a sanctuary of deep, beautiful peace. His work was not just in creating the book, but in caring for the world in which it was made. And now, with his tools at rest and his heart at peace, Master William was ready to find his own rest. The long, holy night was finally over. The cool, silver light of the moon had faded, replaced by the soft, gray light of the dawn. Through the high, leaded glass windows, the coming day announced itself, not with a brilliant flash, but with a gradual, gentle illumination. The scriptorium, which had been a world of dancing shadows and golden warmth, was now being reborn in the pale, pearlescent light of the new day. Master William, standing at his desk, felt the slow turning of the world. The pages, a quiet testament to his night's work, lay before him. Their colors, which had glowed with an inner light in the candlelight, now took on a new, sober beauty in the gray of the morning. The gold, which had shimmered like fire, now held a deep, quiet luster, a solid and eternal presence on the page. With a final, loving touch, he gathered the pages, each one a perfect, smooth canvas of ink, color, and gold. He placed them, one by one, into the manuscript, a heavy, leather-bound book with thick wooden covers. The work was not finished, not yet, but the pages of this night's labor were now a part of a larger, living whole. He closed the book gently, the heavy leather sighing with a deep and satisfied sound. He carried the manuscript to a large, carved chest, a sturdy and beautiful piece of furniture that stood in a corner of the room. The chest was made of dark, heavy wood, its surface etched with the patient hands of a long-dead brother. It was a repository of the monastery's greatest treasures, the illuminated manuscripts, the sacred texts that carried the word of God through the centuries. With a quiet reverence, he laid the manuscript to rest within the chest. It was not an ending, but a new beginning, a moment of peaceful rest before the work would continue. He closed the heavy lid, the sound a soft, final thud in the silent room. He took a last, long look around the scriptorium. The candles, now extinguished, were silent monuments to the work they had guided. The desk was clean, the tools put away. The air, which had held the scent of beeswax and ink, was now filled with the clean, fresh smell of the new day. With a final deep breath, Master William turned and walked away. The light of the dawn poured in through the windows, a quiet, holy flood. It touched the pages in the chest, the desk where he had worked, and the empty space he had just left. He did not look back, but walked with the sure, slow steps of a man at peace, a man whose work was a prayer and whose life was a hymn. The scriptorium, filled with the promise of the coming day, was at rest, waiting for the night to fall once more, and for the work to begin again.